Oh my gosh. Oh, yes, you took, yes, yes. I love that story. There was just three of us. And we had a brother between me and the next house. And the best. That's what I tell you. He had his brother who was 2 years younger. But my dad was a younger brother. I'm a professional engineer. And that's, I'm an yeah. We just got to look at
So once we get everyone seated, I know we still have a few minutes yet, but I'll music down, add the microphone, and turn that up. I'll be very show up. You let me know if you need anything.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you, Nick.
You're welcome.
I've been there many times. Area Resource Center.
Exactly. It said unmanifested. I realized what's right here. Mona Island. Mitchell County. Yeah, like it's me. Good size. Tool chest.
It's addictive, isn't it? I don't know that was the word.
Whenever you're ready.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome today as we celebrate Jim. My name's George Hansen. I'm Jim's first cousin. And our families grew up together really in Turtle Lake, Wisconsin. But I want to welcome you as we celebrate the life of Jim Hansen. And we, of course, mourn his passing. Jim planned his own service, choosing the songs to play and the people to speak. And so our first song will be played now. As the Saints Go Marching In.
Sisters and brothers, Reverend Saxophone getting ready to beat out this fellow Sunday for you. My text this evening, when the Saints go marching in. Here come Brother Hickenbottom down the aisle with his trombone. Blow it, boy. Oh, when the Saints go marching in, when the Saints go marching in, yes, I want to be in that number when the Saints go marching in. When the Saints go marching in, when the Saints go marching in, yes, I want to be in that number when the Saints go marching in.
Hey, there we go. That's how to start a good New Orleans funeral also. How about that? Way to go, Jim. James L. Hansen, age 76, passed away on Sunday, June 22nd, 2025, at home from metastatic prostate cancer. He was born on October 3rd, 1948, the eldest son of Leonard and Teresa St. Louis Hansen of Turtle Lake, Wisconsin. Jim attended the Turtle Lake Consolidated Schools from kindergarten through 8th grade. In September 1962, he began his high school years and 2 years of college at the Holy Cross Seminary in La Crosse. He received an excellent education there, for which he was very grateful. He acquired his Bachelor of Arts from Marquette University in 1970. I have to put something in here, Jane. Can I ad-lib every once in a while? Because Jim told me, I finished 2 years of college at the seminary, and I decided I wasn't going to continue there, so I had to find some place where I could use all my credits in Latin and Greek and philosophy and English. So he went to Marquette. He finished his degree at Marquette in 1970 and his Master in Library Science from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in 1974. That fall, he was hired as reference librarian by the State Historical Society of Wisconsin. Jim spent a wonderful 40 years answering questions, giving lectures all around the country, writing genealogical articles, and editing for several major genealogical journals. In 1995, Jim was named a Fellow of the American Society of Genealogists, an organization limited to 50 members. He retired from the Wisconsin Historical Society in 2014. He's survived by his wife of 50 years, Jane Johnson Hansen, and 2 sons, Ron and Dave of Madison, daughter-in-law Ginger Field Hansen, and granddaughter Daphne. He's further survived by his brothers, Tom and wife Nancy Hansen, Ray and his wife Kathy Hansen of Turtle Lake, and Steve Hansen of Duluth, as well as many nieces and nephews. He was preceded in death by his parents and his youngest brother, Martin Hansen. Now I invite Paula Stewart Warren to come to the podium for some remarks.
Thank you, George. I was surprised when I got the message that Jim wanted me to be a speaker here. And I could tell stories. I could tell a lot of good stories, but I will just tell you some. As I wanted, those of you who are not into genealogy and history that much, I want to tell you something more about his genealogy life. I am Paula Stewart Warren. I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota. For those of you Wisconsinites, you know that's that state nearby. But for you native people of Wisconsin, I have family history. That's why back in 1983, I came for my very first research trip to then the State Historical Society of Wisconsin. And I met this man who was behind the reference desk. And he knew all this stuff. I just kind of watched him and watched his face. I thought, this man knows what he's doing. And then I was able to tell him that I have family connections in Oshkosh, Superior, Berlin, Milwaukee, Beaver Dam. Oh, I could go on and on. Oh, Watertown, Wisconsin. I can't forget that. But his introduction to the genealogy side for the rest of you. I've learned a lot in the last couple of weeks that there's a lot of people in the genealogy world and history world who are missing him terribly. I've gotten a lot of messages, a lot of text messages from people, and it's just kind of hard to see how many people love that man and are going to miss him, not just beyond all of you family members. When my first research trip to the Wisconsin Historical Society, I had, all these things I was going to do, and I was going to do them just like that. Well, I didn't quite get to that, so I had to come back many, many times, and I still, just before COVID hit, was my last trip to the Wisconsin Historical Society to research. But I learned over the years that whenever Jim was leading a group tour from some genealogical or historical society around this State Historical Society, that I would tail at the end of it and listen to him. That man did not have one note in his hand, and he taught. He knew everything in that library. His memory without notes is so just amazing person. So I have to tell you one of my favorite stories about Jim and no notes. With 1989, the National Genealogical Society held a conference in St. Paul, Minnesota. So Minnesota Genealogical Society was the sponsor, not Wisconsin. But we chose 2 Wisconsinites as our leaders for it. Jim Hansen, of course, and Joy Reisinger, late Joy Reisinger of Sparta, Wisconsin. And I was listening to Jim speak at a luncheon. And all of a sudden I looked up, there was a mirrored surface above him. I went, that dang man has no notes. And he is going on talking like he knows this stuff backward and forward. You know, and I've known him for a lot of time then. But he impressed me. I can't tell you enough about that. Then at one point, one of my trips here, I was with my husband then, and he said, would you like to go to dinner with my wife and me tonight? And a lot of our dinners that we had many years after that, we'd go to Pedro's, because we all love Mexican food. And after that, Jane became a dear friend. And then at some point, I got to go to their house for dinner. And I met 2 amazing teenagers who were the silliest kids. Kept us laughing. It was wonderful. So, one of my discussions with Jim was that I was talking about TV, childhood TV. And here's this man from Turtle Lake, Wisconsin, who says, I watch Casey Jones at noontime too. I went, what? He said, we got our TV from the Twin Cities. So we had a discussion about Casey Jones and how he would gather information from people who send in and said, my child's birthday is this, my child's birthday is that. And neither of us could remember if we ever had our birthday celebrated on there, but I'm sure we did. So a little bit back to genealogy part. So I also learned that if you asked him a reference question at the library, and I overheard him asking, you know, other people asking and him responding, and he would say, go up to stack level 11, go to the 3rd aisle on the right, and it's going to be the blue-bound book 3 from the end. Truth. He knew those things. He knew that library inside and out. I was amazed at that. We had a lot of conversations about both French-Canadian research and Native American research, and we helped each other with a lot of the projects we worked on. Until the time I was at, then it was called the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, and he wanted me to do some medieval time period research. I just copied what he wanted because I didn't understand. That was way beyond my area of specialty. So, I mentioned Joy Reisinger already. In the mid-90s, the Association of Professional Genealogists wanted a new executive committee. It was time for that. We had to be voted in. And they came to Jim and me, Joy Reisinger, and Beth Starr, who formerly lived in Wausau, and said, would you like to do this? And they asked me, would I like to be president? I said, oh heck no, I'm not going to be in charge totally. I don't want that responsibility. 3 women were able to convince him to be president. We did well. So all of our meetings, because back then we didn't have Zoom, we barely had email, so what we did was we met here at the Wisconsin Historical Society. It was so much fun to be here and to be in that building. So those of you who do live in Wisconsin, please support the Wisconsin Historical Society because it's a wonderful institution. So a couple of the things. Jim was also very much involved in genealogy conferences and seminars. And I talked a little bit this morning with Mary Jane Herber from Green Bay, who had to go back to work this afternoon, so she can't be with us right now. And we talked about Jim bringing genealogy to the forefront, and also as an advocate for the Wisconsin Historical Society, no matter where he went, where he spoke. And he was instrumental in bringing some of those conferences to this area. One of the great collections that the Wisconsin Historical Society is privileged to have are the Draper manuscripts. Lyman Copeland Draper formerly was on the staff at the Wisconsin Historical Society, and he donated all of his material to the archives here. And he gathered information from first-hand accounts from people really kind of tailored around the Revolutionary War. It is one of those astounding collections that we hold in the United States, and Jim could stand up and talk about what was in those records with no notes. Again, no notes. He then introduced me to Michael Edmonds, who then was the government documents librarian. And Then Michael took me on the stacks of that, and I learned about government documents. What a cool collection here. The things that came together. Now, we joked. You mentioned, George, you know, his birthday is October 3rd, 1948. I was born July 8th, 1948. So we always joked that he was the baby. And I'm thinking of him now as probably he's laughing and going, haha, you're older than me. So, Jane, Ron, Dave, Ginger, and Daphne, who I got to meet, I just thank you for sharing him with me, and thank you for being friendly with me, and I appreciate all he did for me, and I hope I can continue to live out some of what he has done for the world of genealogy and history. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Now, next on the James Hansen hit parade, When the Mountain Meets the Sea. I think.
Touches the valley, all the clouds have taught to fly. Thus our souls shall leave this land most peacefully. Though our minds be filled with questions, in our hearts we'll understand. Most gracefully, thus the winds of time shall take us with a sure and steady hand. The river meets the sea. Patience, my brothers, and patience, my sons, in that sweet and final hour, truth and justice will be done. Like a baby when it is sleeping, its loving mother's arms. Baby things is a mystery. God is blind to find a purpose, and in time he'll understand. Meets the
When the Mountain Meets the Sea. I have a few words to speak. When Jane contacted me and said Jim was planning his service and he would like to know if you would say a few words. So, as I said, I'm Jim's cousin. It's an honor to be able to say a few words about cousin Jim. James L. Hansen was born October 3rd, 1948. Son of Leonard L. Hansen and Teresa St. Louis Hansen. Grandson of Louis H. Hansen. Great-grandson of Andrew Hansen. Great-great-grandson of Hans Torersen Breivik. Great-great-great-grandson of Thorer Hansen Mullerud. great-great-great-great-grandson of Hans Thorsen Vig. And, well, I'll just go through the rest of the genealogy that Jim prepared for us, for all of us Hansens, a number of years ago. But I thought that was an appropriate way to begin some remarks about Jim, because we've learned so much about our Hansen family from him. Jim's parents, my Uncle Leonard and Aunt Teresa, they were my godparents also. And their farm, which now Cousin Tom lives on, was just across the section from our farm growing up. And as we grew up, the Christmases for the Hansens and the Hansen and the Johnsons, there were Johnson cousins too. The Christmas was at our house. New Year's Day was at the Johnsons. And somewhere around Thanksgiving, we were at Uncle Len's. And you never knew exactly if it would be on Thanksgiving Day or not, because you know what that is in Wisconsin? Hunting season. So you never knew whether it was going to be right on Thanksgiving Day, or maybe the Sunday before, or maybe the Sunday after, or something, because you had to work around the hunting schedules. We were all members of the Lucky Horseshoe 4-H Club. And the softball field, we had trouble sometimes getting a field to play games on. So my dad offered a little piece of land on our farm that he didn't really use for much for the softball field. So we put up the backstop. The 4-H came and put up a backstop, and we played softball at our field. But my dad always remembered Jim standing on a stump in his batting stance. And of course, then Jim was left-handed. So Jim would be on his batting stance, and he said, "This is a baseball player in the Hall of Fame. That's where I hope to be someday." So you never know what you're going to end up doing. So that was an early aspiration of Jim, but that didn't really happen. So
coordination thing kind of got in the way.
well, and the other thing about Jim and baseball was, of course, we were all Milwaukee Braves fans. In 1967, 57, the Braves beat the Yankees. Jim was a Mickey Mantle. He was a Yankee fan. We held that against him a little bit, but it was okay. One time we were playing a softball game against the McKinley 4-H, and the McKinley 4-H played on a baseball field actually. So there was a baseball pitcher's mound there, but they had the softball field set up inside that, and the backstop was way, way behind home plate. So they had a ground rule that if there was a passed ball, you couldn't steal. Couldn't steal. It was just too far away. Well, Jim had the idea, when he got on base, that he would take off when the catcher started throwing the ball back to the pitcher. So there hadn't been a passed ball. And he took off and stole second base. And the pitcher happened to be a girl. And she said, "Get back to that base." She didn't want him to do that. "You can't steal base." Well, he didn't steal because the catcher missed the ball. He stole because they threw it back. And she sat on the pitcher's mound and waited until they finally said, "Okay, that's all." Our Aunt Irene, I talk about a little bit, Aunt Iney, she used to take some of us nieces and nephews on trips in the summer. Aunt Irene was a school teacher and taught in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan for many years. And in the summer, she would come back to Turtle Lake and be with the families around Turtle Lake. And she took some of my older brothers to the Black Hills and this and that. Well, one summer, she took me and Tom and Jim and I think Fred and Jerry Johnson. And we went to the North Shore of Lake Superior for an overnight. So we get to this cabin up in the North Shore, and it's bedtime, of course, and everybody's going to bed. And as everybody's quieted down and Aunt Iney turns the lights out and things, we hear Jim pipe up, "Nighty-night, everybody." And of course, you know what that did then. That kind of broke up the crowd. Another thing we did, the summer of 1967, if any of you, a lot of you are old enough to remember this. What happened in 1967?
Excellent.
There was a World Fair, Expo 67 in Montreal. Well, Tom and Jim and I decided somehow we're going to go to Expo 67. 3 teenage guys. My mother just passed away that spring, but so we're going to go. My dad says go ahead and go. So I think Tom drove because Jim didn't drive, and I think Jane taught Jim to drive eventually. But anyhow, but here the 3 guys, teenage guys, we're going to drive to Montreal, and we were going to camp. And we did camp once, I think, along in a provincial park along there in Ontario someplace. We arrived in Montreal, and this is a pretty big place. Where's this Expo thing? And we stopped at a gas station that had Expo information said on it. So we stopped at this gas station and we asked the guy, well, we're looking for a campground. And he said, oh, do you have a reservation? No, we didn't have any reservation. Well, you'll never get a camping spot if you don't have a reservation. But he said, I know a place not far from here that's renting rooms. And so he gave us the directions, and he said, you come back and tell me if you take it or not. So we went to this place, and it was a retired couple, really, that were renting rooms in their house during the expo. And it was only, I think, $15 a night or $12 a night, something like that. And so we took it, and we went back to the gas station and to tell the guy that we took it. And he said, well, good. He said, that's my uncle. But if this place wasn't any good, I wouldn't send anybody there. It was right across, really, just down the block from the metro station, the subway, that took you right out to the expo. So we ended up having a good time at Expo 67, the 3 of us. Jim ended up, of course, at Marquette and UW-Milwaukee and married Jane and to the State Historical Society. I did a couple of degrees at UW-River Falls, and then they hired me in the admissions office so I could pay my student loans back and things. But I'd be in Madison from time to time for UW system meetings and for college fairs and things like that I did. And so I'd pop into the Historical Society at lunchtime and look up Jim, and we'd go do lunch on State Street someplace and would have a nice time and have a nice visit that way. And sometimes when I would be driving around, of course, doing school visits and so on, I would flip on, I'd have on Wisconsin Public Radio. And here one day I have Wisconsin Public Radio on, and here comes Larry Mueller's show. And my guest today is Jim Hansen from the State Historical Society. He's going to be talking about genealogy, if you have questions about genealogy and so on, and tracing your family histories. And so I would hear Jim every once in a while on the radio. I was tempted to pull over, it was pre-cell phone, and I was tempted to pull over and call in and ask him if he knew anything about this Hansen family in Turtle Lake, Wisconsin. But I never did that. But and then you mentioned something about the boys, of course, and I'd go over to their house, and one time I went over to their house when I was in town, and I'm sitting on the sofa there, and the boys were, they were like junior high age, I think. And they kept kind of looking at me and pointing and giggling, and then they're looking at their dad, and he's kind of smiling, and I finally said, what's going on here? What's this all about? And Jim says, well, the boys think you look like Tim Conway. And you know, they weren't the only ones that told me that over the years. I had other people when I'd be doing school visits with students. You know, you look like Tim Conway. And you act like no. Anyway. Another time, I remember we went to Warner Park for a baseball game was it the Muskies then? Madison Muskies. They're the only team with flippers. Let's win one for the Kipper. Madison Muskies. Let's go fish, right? We went to the fish game, or the Muskies game, and they were passing out little baseballs, you know, with coupons on them. I got one of those. And it was a coupon for ice cream at Ellis Deli. And we went from the game to Ellis Deli. That was a good time. We had two. Well, I could go on with more stuff. And I was an old admissions person, so I'm used to talking for like a school period. But we'll call that enough. Jim's gone now. but he's not forgotten, and our family story continues with Jane and Ron and Dave and Ginger and Daphne and all of us that will keep Jim in our memory. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jim. And on behalf of Jane and the family, we really appreciate all of you being here and all of your support in all the 10 years that Jim went through here. But the family now invites you to join us in a meal here at the funeral home as we leave on a light note to a song Jim was introduced to in about 1962 in music class while he was in the seminary, the Vatican Rag.
First you get down on your knees, fiddle with your rosaries, bow your head with great respect and genuflect, genuflect, genuflect. Do whatever steps you want if you have cleared them with the pontiff. Everybody say his own Kyrie eleison, doing the Vatican right.
Ray knows it.
Get in line in that processional, step into that small confessional. They're the guy who's got religion. I'll tell you if your sin's original. If it isn't, try playing it safer. Drink the wine and chew the wafer. 2, 4, 6, 8. Time to transubstantiate. So get down upon your knees, fiddle with your rosaries, bow your head with great respect and genuflect, genuflect, genuflect. Take a cross on your abdomen. When in Rome, do like a Roman. Ave Maria, gee, it's good to see you. Getting ecstatic and sort of dramatic and doing the Vatican right.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, it's
All done?
lunchtime.
It's lunchtime. We'll go ahead and we're gonna release by rows. Go right in there and start nibbling.
John, I ran into Mary Williams.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Did you run into her?
The Montreal Expo. My dad was done with his brothers or with his friends.
Like, like, you like
That name?
name?
No, but I was gonna.
I learned that from my buddy Frank Gendler, who's from the Dallas School. He taught me that.
It's a big house. Very nicely done, sir.
I could have told one more story when our Aunt Irene died, and she was 93 or 4 or something. My dad was 90 something, and at the lunch, we get to the lunch at the church hall, and in essence, her son, it was her nephew, but she raised him because her mother had died. His mother had died, and Aunt Irene raised him. But Bob Doble he's speaking, and his 2 boys are speaking. They're reading a poem, and they're this and that. And we're sitting there at the table waiting to eat. And my dad kind of leaned over to me and said, "Wish they'd quit yapping."